So in Python, basically we have two types of errors. One is syntax error and another is exceptions. When we know that which line of code might throw an error, so we keep that line of code in the try block. So I'll keep in this try, and so when I hit shift enter, it will throw the error that it says no module named error, and this is the module not found error, right? Welcome back to the day 17 of the 100 days of hell with Python algo trading. To be honest with you, today is not day 17. In fact, it is day 15. And today I have to record multiple videos so that we can avoid skipping any day. Because today I'm going back to my country for a few days and I don't want that we break the streak. So that's why I have to put some extra effort. And yeah, that's the very basic information. So then let's start with today's topic, that is error handling. So in Python, basically we have two types of errors. One is syntax error and another is exceptions. So syntax error happens during compilation, means like we are writing the code and at that time if there is some kind of, so basically we can say that syntax error are grammatical mistake, as if we consider Python as a language, then whatever the grammatical mistake you are making, those are the syntax errors. And when it comes to the exceptions, we can say these are the logical errors. So even if we have written all the code correct, but what happens during runtime, there might be some exceptions which we didn't think before, and those might occur, right? So that's a basic difference, and let's deep dive into this topic. Let's understand syntax errors. So syntax errors occurs when the Python interpreter encounters a code structure that it doesn't recognize. These errors must be fixed before the program can run. Means, as we considered that if Python is a language, then if we are making any grammatical mistake, it would be considered as a syntax error. Means that Python interpreter will not recognize that structure and it will throw a syntax error. So let's say for printing, we have the syntax, right? Print and let's say hello. But if somehow we miss this brackets here and we just execute this code, then it will throw a syntax error. Hope you are getting my idea. Don't worry, we'll take so many examples, but for now, just understand the concept. So in the context of algo trading, syntax errors can prevent your trading algorithm from being executed, leading to missed trading opportunities or other issues. So if you make any syntax error, then it might happen that when the opportunity comes and at that time your code throws a syntax error, so it will become a disaster. So make sure that you are not making any syntax error. So the example of a syntax error in algo trading is, let's say, missing colon at the end of the if statement, right? So here we need to have a colon, correct? Most of the time you will be able to figure out the syntax errors easily because your IDE will show you that there is some error in your code. So you'll be able to find out these errors, not an issue with these. So let's move to the next kind of errors, which are exceptions. What are the exceptions? So exceptions are errors that occur during the execution of a program. They can be caught and handled using try and except. So as we have seen that syntax error happen during the compilation, but sometimes even if you have everything correct, your old syntax is right, and still after the compilation, during the runtime, there might be some unexpected input, right? For example, you have written a code to add two numbers. So instead of an integer, the user might pass a string and it will throw an error, right? So those are the exceptions. So we need to have a strong, robust technique to handle all those errors. So let's proceed. They can be caught and handled using try and except blocks. So in Python, we have try and except to handle those errors. So in Java, we have try, catch, throw, right? But in Python, we have try, except, and raise. Then allowing the program to continue run or to fail gracefully. So what happens if we use these try and except, then what will happen? Either the code will run, or even if it fails, it will fail gracefully. It will not throw a very scary error on your screen, and it might sometimes harm the user experience, right? And as a programmer, our main motto is to provide as much as convenience to the user, correct? So in algo trading, handling exceptions is crucial to ensure that unexpected events such as network failures, invalid inputs, or market closures do not cause the entire trading system to crash. So we have to make some kind of a mechanism that handle all kind of unexpected events, right? So here we have few common exceptions in algo trading. So the first common exception is runtime error. It is very common. What happens? Let's say we are calling the function get current price and we are passing the argument a string apple, and in return we are getting a 0. Sometime it might happen that due to any reason we are getting price is equals to 0. So what will happen? 10 divided by 0 will throw an error that is known as potential division by 0 if price is 0. So it will throw a 0 division error. right? The next is the type error. Here what happens, the same example, and here volume is equals to 100, but it is in string. So if we try to find the total cost, so what will happen, price into a string will throw a type error because it needs to be a string. So we have to convert this to a string and then we can multiply. So it is a type error because the expected type is integer, but here we have a string type. That's why. Next we have is the name error, and in which what happens, it might possible that the quantity name doesn't exist, right? So it will throw a name error. And for the key error, it generally have in dictionary. So in dictionary we have key and values, and sometimes if the key is not existing and if we still call the key, it will throw a key error. So these are very simple. Next we have attribute error. So in a class we have multiple attributes and we are calling an attribute which is not existing in the class, so it will throw an attribute error. So these are some basic types, and let's quickly move to the coding examples. As we have already seen that there are two stages where error might happen. So the first is during compilation. So whatever the error happens during compilation, these are known as the syntax error. And the second is during execution. So whatever the error happens during execution, these are known as the exceptions. So in syntax error, something in the program is not written according to the program grammar. The second is error is raised by the interpreter or compiler. The third is you can solve it by rectifying the program. So these are simple pointers. So let's take an example of, so we have seen that this is the correct print statement, right? Hello. But somehow if we miss this bracket, which happens during the initial phase of the programming, the beginners make this mistake sometimes. So when we hit shift enter, it will throw an error which says syntax error, missing parenthesis in call to print. Did you mean print? So it will show you that how we can rectify this. And the next we have few more examples of syntax error. So the first is leaving symbols like colon or brackets. For example, if I write if true and colon, then pass, and when we hit shift enter, it will work. But if somehow we forgot this colon, then what will happen? It will throw a syntax error which says expected a colon, right? Next is misspelling a keyword. Let's take the same example. So instead of if I write if I write IFF, then true and pass, it will throw the error for sure, and it will say syntax error, invalid syntax. Next we have is incorrect indentation. So let's take the same example, and if true and below, this is the correct, right? Pass, it will work. But if somehow I miss the indentation and if I pass it here, then it will throw the error and it says expected an indented block after if statement on line 1. So that's how these errors works. Now let's take few more examples of errors. So the first is index error, and the index error is thrown when trying to access an item at an invalid index. So what happens? Let's say we have a list and it contains the items 1, 2, 3, and if I try to access L0, so the next is module not found error. As we have recently seen that we have to import JSON module while working with the JSON files. So let's say I'll type import JSON, then what I'll do with open, and here I can just give the name module.json, and we can give a write mode here and as f, and let's say I want to write, so f dot write, and I'll write testing module not found error. So when I hit shift enter, a file will be created. But if somehow we missed this JSON, we forgot to add this, so I'll just cut it. And when we hit shift enter, actually it's done already. So if I remove this file for now, delete this, and now when I try to run this again, I think maybe somewhere else in this file it is written. So what I'll do, I'll just try to, let's do one thing, that instead of JSON, I'll just misspell it. Okay, so I'll write, so this JSON is not existing. So when I hit shift enter, it will throw the error that it says no module named error, and this is the module not found error, right? This one. The next we have is key error. So let's say we have a dictionary, and inside that the value is, let's say, stock, and that is apple. And now if I try to access the stock, we can access, but somehow if we like try to access, because stocks doesn't exist in this dictionary, so it will throw a key error. So what happens in type error? Let's say I'm trying to add 1 plus 1, so it will give me 2. But somehow if I like try to add 1 plus a string of 1, then it will show me a type error because it says unsupported operand type as for the plus, integer and string. So now let's take an example of value error. So what happens here? It says the value error is thrown when a function's argument is of an inappropriate type. So what happens here? Let's say I write int, and here we are expecting some other value, but if I type a here, what it will show me? It says value error, which says invalid literal for int with base 10 and a. So this is value error. So the next is name error. The name error is thrown when an object could not be found. So for example, any value, let's say a, so it will show me a is not defined. So for that, we have to define the a, and let's say if I type a is equals to 2, then it can print the value. So next we have is the attribute error. So let's say we have a list, and inside that we have few items, 1, 2, 3, 34, 4, it's okay. Now we are trying to apply a method which is not existing in this. So when I run this, it says attribute error because list object has no attribute upper. So that's how you can think of the attribute error. Next we have is the stake trace. So what is stake trace? You can see here that we have this kind of stack. So in this we have the name of the error. Then we have a message which says list object has no attribute upper. And above that, it is clearly showing us that it is in the cell 55, line 4. And inside that also, it is giving us an arrow, and which is displaying the exact place of the error where it is happening. So this whole stack is known as the stack trace. So that's the basic idea of the syntax errors. And now let's move to the next part, which is exceptions. So as we have already understood that syntax error happens during compilation and exceptions happens during the runtime. So let's understand them one by one. Now let's understand the exceptions. So what are the exceptions? If things go wrong during the execution of a program runtime, it generally happens when something unforeseen has happened. So exceptions are raised by Python runtime, and you have to tackle is on the fly, correct? So example, we can take memory overflow and divide by 0, a logical error and a database error. So what happens? Let's say if you are handling large machine learning model, and sometimes because of that memory, you might get a memory overflow error because your memory is not able to handle that amount of data. Divide by 0, we have seen that already, a logical error, because sometime when you try to divide 1 by 0 or any other integer by 0, it will show you a logical error. Right? Then again, we have database error. So in that, what happens? Sometime when you are trying to connect with database, and let's say your program is dependent on that database, it might happen that you are getting some unexpected value from the database, and because of that, your program might break, or it might show you an error. And because of that, it might happen that your code show any exceptions. So let's understand it with the code. So what I'll do here, I'll create a file, and let's say with open, and I create the file with the name, let's say exceptions.txt. Then I'll write something in this f.write, and I'll write simply testing exceptions, and I'll just hit enter. We can see that we have a file here which is having the content, right? But now when we are like reading the file, so I'll create another code cell, and now let's try to read this file. So I'll change from write to read mode, and from here I just have to write the read, and I'll print this also. So now we can see that we have the content. So far, everything is okay. But somehow we have misspelled the file name. And instead of exception, I have write exceptions. And now when I try to run the program, it will show me file not found error. Because there is no syntax error, there is no grammatical error in this code, but this is an exception because it happened because of the input from the user or input from any other source. So these are known as the exceptions. And now let me tell you one more thing, that why it becomes so important to handle these exceptions. Let me show you. So you can see here that it is showing us path, correct? OPT, Anaconda 3, lib Python 3, something like that. So it is clearly showing us a path. And let's say we have a big line of code, And inside that, if he is really smart, what he will do, he will get so much of very important and confidential data, and because of that he can combine that data later and he might misuse that vulnerability. These are known as the vulnerabilities, to be very precise. So he might use that and he might hack into your system. So that's why it becomes very important to handle these errors. And the second thing is that generally if the user is displayed with these kind of scary errors, it will be very unpleasant to the user, and we don't want that, right? It will be a very bad experience in terms of the UI, and definitely it will impact our end goal, that is the sales and marketing. So because of those reasons, we have to handle these kind of exceptions. Now comes the try and except block. In Python, we have try except, and in Java, we have try catch block, and it's like the functionality is same, just the name is different. So let's start with the try and except block. Now let's proceed and see that how we can handle these kind of exceptions. What I'll do, I'll just copy and paste this code in the next cell. So here, now we know that this error was due to this line, correct? So what we can do, we can use here the try and catch demo. So what we do, when we know that which line of code might throw an error, so we keep that line of code in the try block. So I'll keep in this try and I'll write here except, and I'll print file not found, correct? Now let's first correct this. So we know that this exception.txt is existing here. So when we try to run this code, it will show us the content. But if somehow, if the file is not existing or if the file name is wrong, so what happened here, this try block tried this code, and if there was any error that was caught by this except block, so here we know that it is catching all kind of errors. There is no specifications that it should catch which type of error. So means if you want to display that, if the type of error is different, it should display different kind of message. Let's move to the next part, which is catching specific exceptions. So what I'll do, I'll just copy and paste this code, okay? And we know that this file is not existing, so we'll make it right. And this file is existing. So when we hit shift enter, it will display the content. But now let's try with some other error. So what I'll do here, I'll write here print and ABC. And we know that this ABC doesn't exist here. So A and C also doesn't exist. So when we try to run this, it will show us that testing executions and file not found. So what is happening here? First, it will print this because this is existing. And now it will throw an error and that will be caught by this except. But we know that that is not the file not found error. That is different. That is the name error because A and C doesn't exist here. So for that, what we can do, we have to define these all except blocks with the specific errors. So this is a file not found error. So what I'll do here, I'll add file not found error because now this name error is not caught by this file not found error, and it will again show us the scary code and which is not recommended. So what we will do, we'll add another block of except. We will tell this block that you can expect a name error. So name error, and now we can print name not found. And now when we run this, it will show us the error name not found, correct? Now let's try with something else. So if in this code we have two errors, the first is file not found and the second is a name error. So we know that the Python interpreter runs line by line. So first it will display the file not found error and it will print out that only, right? So let's correct this first, correct this also. What I'll do here, I'll define A and C is equals to 1, let's say, and when we run this, it will show us both the values, testing exceptions and 1. Now let's say we have some another kind of error, and let's say we have a type error. So what I'll do here, I'll add here 1, let's say print 1 and plus string of 1. So we know that this is integer and this is string, so it will not display the value, but it will display an error. So when we run this, it says unsupported operand type for integer and string. So for that, what we can do, we can add another except block, except, and here we can add type error, and now we can print that incorrect type. We can say we can print our desired message, no problem. Okay, now what we'll do, we'll just correct this, and so it will print the correct value, right? Testing executions 1 and 2. And now let's say we have an index error. So what I'll do, I'll just here, I'll define a list. So let's say L is equals to 1, 2, 3, 4. And here what I'm trying to do, I like to print L, and here I'll give 10. So we know that this 10 is not there, the index, and it will show us the index error, list index out of range. So for that also we can add here except index error, and then it can print this value index out of range, right? So it will be handled gracefully. But now let's say we tried our best to add all the except blocks, but still we have missed few of them. So for that, what we can do, we can add a generic block which will catch all the other errors which we have not mentioned here, right? So what we will do here, I'll write except exception as E, and then just print. So let's say if we have here, let's say we have here a 0 division error. So what I can do, I can write 1 divided by 0. So what is happening here, actually we have to correct this because Python runs one by one and it will first display this index error. So let's correct this and I'll just change it to 1. So now you can see that it executed all the values above, and for the last one, the index out of range, we didn't have any block and we have a generic block. So that's how we can use this except, and you can search a list of errors and you can use in your own code, right? Now let's move to the next part, which is else. So in exceptions also we have else. So what I'll do here, I'll just copy and paste this code. And so what is the use of this? Now we know that this is the problematic code, and if there is any error, that will be coded by this except. Now where we can use the else block. So let's say what I'll do here, I'll just remove this and I'll make it as f is equals to and print. I'll remove this and here I'll add another block with the else. So now what is happening here, this is the only problematic code. So if the name of the file is not correct, it will throw the error and that will be coded by the except. And if the issue is not there, then this program will run, right? So let's try this. It says invalid syntax. Where it is, okay, we need to remove this one. And now it says file not found because this is not existing here. So when I remove this, it will show as the testing exceptions. So it is simple. If there is any error, it will be caught by this except block. And if there is no error, then what will happen? This else block will execute and it will execute the code inside the else block. So that's very simple. We can use this else block in so many scenarios, right? Now let's move to the next part, which is finally else. Now next we have is the finally. So let me quickly copy and paste this code and I'll paste here. And now what we'll do, we'll add this problematic line of code in try block. Then in except block, we have the error, that is print file not found. So what we can do, we can write here file not found error, correct? Then if this error is not existing, then this code will run, correct? So if there is any error, then this code will not run. So let's try both the things. So first I have changed this to like some different name, and when I try to run, it will throw me this except error, correct? And if I correct this name, then it will print out the results. Now what I do, I'll add another block, that is finally block. So I'll add finally, and what it will do, it will run in any condition. Like, so whether there is any error or not, it will run in any case. So let's say finally, I will always execute, we can say, right? And let's say we have an error here. So I will change the name to exceptions. And when I hit shift enter, first it will throw this error, file not found error. Then it will run this code. I will always execute. So sometime you might need this also. So you can keep in mind. So next we have is the raise exception. So what happens in this? In Python programming, exceptions are raised when errors occurs at runtime. We can also manually raise exceptions using the raise keyword. So we can optionally pass values to the exception to clarify why that exception was raised. Previously, we have seen that those all exceptions were raised at runtime. But if we want to raise the exceptions manually, we can also do that. So let's raise the exception manually. So what we'll do here, I'll write raise, and we can take any error. So for example, file not found error, and we can print a message here. So I was just trying to raise manual exception, right? So when I hit shift enter, it will display file not found error at raise stack, and inside that the message will be I was just trying to raise manual exception. So in your code, you can use these manual exceptions wherever you require, right? Now let's take a simple example of the raise exception. So we have example here. Now you can see that we have a class with the name trading error, and here we are inheriting the exception class. Otherwise it will not work. Make sure that you are inheriting the exception class. Then we have a constructor function here. Inside that we have attribute with the message and a method with handle. Okay, now we have the next class, which is authentication error, and that is also inheriting the exception class. And inside that also we have the constructor function and the handle method, right? So this is how you can use the raise manually in your code if you require. And so for this session, this is it. And if you have any issue, just let us know. And also please attempt the multiple choice questions, and you have the link inside the description and the task link and the mini project link. It will really help you. So until then, take care. Bye bye. Have a nice day. See you.